The summer transfer window closed on Friday evening. We ran a poll on X this week to get your opinion on the window, and it was a solid 8 out of 10, really, according to your responses. Alfie, a busy day for you. How many hours sleep did you get before Brentford? About 4 hours, wasn't it, by the time it was all done?
I mean, I don't know if anybody follows my Twitter, if they watched the video I did from the GTAC after the match. But even I looked back at that and went, Jesus, I
Bags under the eyes.
I looked terrible. I think I had about 4 hours sleep, but that was self-inflicted because I stayed up quite late to write a few more bits for the morning. I think 8 out of 10 is probably a fair assessment for the window. I think the reason it's not a 9 or a 10, 1 point knocked off for the fact they still haven't signed, and I know this doesn't really exist, but guaranteed goals. They haven't signed somebody who comes with pedigree of, okay, I'm going to get the ball, take it 10 yards and smash it into the back of the net 15 times a season. They haven't done that, and obviously I think it was quite unrealistic they ever were going to. Cameron Archer was their £15 million striker signing. You know, he needs to be that guy. And then I think the other point I'm taking off is because they've got a squad which is way too big. And not necessarily in terms of registration, because I think me and Steve spoke about it a little bit. I think we did. They probably have to take off 1 or 2 players. That could be Paul Onuachu. It could be Gavin Zuni while he's injured. But otherwise, pretty much everybody can be registered. But they've got too many players, quite simply. And the biggest problem I felt with Nathan Jones and Ruben Sellers, they couldn't manage effectively because they have 31 players in the dressing room all the time. And they've got basically exactly that now. You know, we spoke about Samadozi, his loan falling through, disappointing for him. Amo-Ameyaw, they wanted to sell him. You know, who else? Paul Onuachu, they want to sell him. Kamadine Suleiman is still there. There's a lot of players who you probably could have done with getting rid of, and no offers came in, basically. So I think that could be a problem when it comes to managing the morale and the dynamics of the squad this season. But other than that, I thought it was a good window. They addressed goalkeeper. They addressed some depth. I think they added some decent players. 8 out of 10.
The Aaron Ramsdale thing, Alfie, I mean, it was this time last week, wasn't it? We were convinced it was going to be buy low, and we did a nice little video with a Dutch journalist telling us all about him, which we'll file just in case we end up signing him eventually. But the Ramsdale thing just seemed to happen fairly quickly, and then once we knew he was coming, the wheels were in motion, and it just went on from there, really. It was one that I don't think any of us thought we'd be able to pull off.
Yeah, well, I think originally the messages we were getting was they didn't want to buy a goalkeeper permanently. Obviously, the reason why Cornet came in late, I suppose, is because originally they were exploring Ramsdale as a loan. When Arsenal, I presume, didn't budge on that, they managed to negotiate a decent deal to buy him, and I think it is a decent deal, to be fair, because if they go down, which might well happen, he's not going to lose value beyond the point of 18 to 25 million. Certainly not. It sounds like he's probably a high earner at the club, but you pay for that. You pay for that pedigree. So yeah, I think they probably, when that came available, they moved quickly on it, and I was quite impressed by it. It's one that when we saw at Brentford, fans are excited by it. They're excited by the fact they've signed an England international, somebody who's been challenging for a Premier League title 2 years ago, was in theory last season as well. Obviously wasn't playing. So it's a big one.
What's your take on the window, John? How was it for you? Obviously, Kyle Walker-Peters staying, we mentioned. You know, for me, I think that's one of the big headlines. And then the keeper and Maxwell Cornet too.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one because we've kind of been like drip feeding signings throughout. You forget it's about, you know, Taylor and Flynn Downs because they were with us last season. You forget that they're new signings, but they are, and they were kind of number 1 and number 2 because we wanted to keep that consistency and continuity. But I apart from, as Alfie mentioned, you know, a striker, I think no one can have any complaints. Ramsdale is probably the biggest like big name signing we've made in like living memory for me. And yeah, we've effectively signed like a whole new 11 plus. It's incredible, really. It's unheard of for, as a Saints fan, for that kind of thing to happen. So yeah, I don't think that there can be any complaints unless sort of they all turn out to be rubbish. But we've seen quite a few of them, certainly against Cardiff, and they've all been pretty good. So yeah, I think it's good, and it's also exciting because we've got players like Maxwell Cornet, who's Premier League experience. He could come in and tear it up in theory. We don't know yet, obviously, but that's someone else who could come in. And of course, we do still have the Scottish Drogba to come back at some point. Wonder if he'll play. Yeah, so I think overall, yeah, like you say, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, we can't really complain. In terms of outgoings, I was going to ask you, Alfie, obviously the Turkish window's left open. You said you potentially the Dutch one as well. Is Tall Paul going? Do we know, like, does it look like him or any others that we need to go, could go?
Well, they'd like to, wouldn't they? They've wanted him to go for 6-7 weeks now. It ultimately depends on if someone's going to pay the money, and at this point, they probably would take an offer of the size they rejected, which is around £5 million. I'm certain if a club offered £5 million now, they'd probably just accept it. But yeah, I don't know if anything's imminent. But I think with Turkey, there's still at least 10 days left. So yeah, hopefully is the answer.
Okay, last minute then.
And Jaden Meghoma to Brentford, Alfie, was one we didn't really see coming. Certainly not for the sort of money that we seem to have got for him.
No, but we knew that he's out of contract at the end of the year and he wasn't going to sign a new one. So I was fairly confident they'd try and sell him. I think I was speaking to George, my colleague, on the way up to the training ground that morning. I was saying, well, if they can get sort of a few 100,000 for him, that they probably would accept it.
What did we sign him for? $500,000, wasn't it? Because we got him and Amo-Ameyaw at the same time, wasn't it? For £1 million.
Yeah, totally wrong about that. 10 million. Sure, on reflection, £10 million. Jaden Meghoma, when he came into the squad, he always played well. He was one of the ones who we said last season that he looks like a senior player. He's a good lad. So I think it's a good deal for everybody. I think Brentford need a left back. We had Billy on last week, and he said that they've got Rico Henry and nobody else in that position. So I think he could potentially get games in the Premier League at some point this season. But for Saints, £5 million up front, a further £5 million in add-ons. It's a good deal for them when they couldn't sell anyone else.
That's a good point, Steve, that Jon makes. We did a bit of business, or quite a bit of business early on. There was kind of like that drip feed of players throughout the window. So it was never going to be that kind of that frantic last minute window. But as it happens, Ryan Fraser coming in as well. I think we're all a bit like, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. What are your thoughts just on the window? And would you have liked to seen a few more maybe go out?
Yeah, I think ultimately you want to have a relatively lean squad whilst kind of having enough contingency for the worst of an injury crisis. But yeah, overall it's been pretty good. I think we've improved in most areas of the pitch. Difficult to kind of think of any areas where we've gone backwards, to be honest. I think it feels like an improvement, albeit perhaps slightly bloated, where we've not been able to cast away some of the sort of waifs and strays that we wanted to, but kind of, I mean, you're never going to be able to.
That's always the way, though, isn't it? You never get rid of the ones you want to get rid of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you were basically selling everybody, the ones that you don't want to leave are the ones that would be first out the door. That's just the brutal reality of it, isn't it? And I'm sure this time next year we'll be. I mean, if we've gone straight back down, we'll be bemoaning the fact that we've had to sell 4 or 5 of our best players. But that is the way of the world, unfortunately. But I think in terms of the deals that we've done, we got a fair amount of business done early. A lot more than we've done in previous years, whether that was PSR related in terms of fitting it in before the end of the financial year. Maybe there's a bit of that, but I mean, certainly nothing to the weird extent that we saw with the likes of Villa, Chelsea, and Newcastle and Forest, with their very bizarre and dubious-looking transfer dealings. But yeah, I think we've spent plenty of money, which I think people seem to fail to grasp this fact that actually we have spent a lot of money. Wages also have to be paid. Bear in mind the bloated size of the squad. Yeah. The players that we don't want, we've still got to pay them. Like Onuachu is still presumably on the significant salary that he was on when we signed him 2 years ago, as an example. So yeah, the financial within the financial constraints, I think we've done pretty well. I think. I mean, the only kind of sticking thing for me would have been maybe a sort of different profile centre forward, maybe a big sort of strong centre forward who would be able to be that sort of link man, kind of essentially what Ivan Toney's been to Brentford over the last 4 years or so. But unfortunately for that sort of type of player and of the caliber we'd need, we're probably not in the market for those sort of fees.
Yeah, and they wouldn't want to come to play for us anyway, would they?
Perhaps not. I mean, you put in sort of convenient clauses and you make the financial settlement worthwhile enough, then yeah, you can probably convince anybody. But you've got to do that whilst retaining the sort of harmony of the existing squad.
Mm.
I mean, Ramsdale's coming in presumably as our highest paid player. I would imagine he is probably the only player on 6 figures a week. Would be my guess. I've no evidence to back that up, but that would be my guess, given that he was on possibly about 150 at Arsenal. So him coming in, but the players know where the level that he's been playing at.
Yeah.
And he's coming from a certain level, and as a result, he is going to be paid that much. Once our players start proving they're at that sort of level themselves, then by all means knock on Phil Parsons' door with your agent and say, I want 100 grand a week, please. Until you've done that, you'll stick with what you're on. But yeah, I think we're in a reasonable position. I mean, looking at what Leicester and Ipswich have done, I think Leicester had a better squad going up, but have made themselves weaker. I think Ipswich's dealings, I think you could toss a coin on many of those. I mean, Liam Delap obviously scored yesterday, but 20 million quid, I wouldn't have wanted us to be paying that for him. So ultimately, these deals have got to be right for their own clubs. So we'll see. I think we've given ourselves a chance. There's enough that we've brought in that will give good competition to the players we've already got. Hence the discussion earlier about which ones Russell Martin is ruthlessly going to consign to the subs bench for the next month. So yeah, we'll see how they pan out. I mean, they're not all going to succeed. Obviously, you don't get 100% success record. Even Brighton in their sort of recent brilliant transfer dealing days haven't had 100% hit rate on their transfers. You just don't. Some will come good, some won't, and it's about getting the balance. And hopefully, the balance of the scales is tipping slightly in one direction than the other.